Players are on the move, and so are we here at the Voice of College Football. So this is what we are doing each and every day. It's our transfer portal update right here at the Voice of College Football, right next to Leanne Herring. I'm Mark Rogers. Great to see all of you. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. Leanne, how you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Finally kind of catching our breath. I think after the last, what are we? I guess day 3, day 4, I can't quite keep up. It's been a hectic time in the portal. We've seen a lot of big names come and go. We've already seen some key guys that we've kind of mentioned early on in the last 2 days already find their homes. We see some surprises. We were just talking right now before we went on air that there was a player from Ole Miss who just hit the thing. That just goes to show you how fast the portal moves. I just checked it about, I guess, 15 minutes ago to make sure we kept everybody up to date. And here we go. Ole Miss offensive tackle Kavian Broussard is leaving Ole Miss, heading to check out like many of the players who didn't see a lot of action. One of our recruits from last season, 6'6", 310 checks all the boxes as far as, didn't see a lot of action as far as the Rebels go. And that's what we see with a lot of these young guys, trying to go to a place, not necessarily that, they couldn't develop at Ole Miss, but again, we've talked about a topic that we've talked about, Mark, about trying to go to a place where they're going to be able to get some more reps, some more development, where they have an opportunity not to sit back. With the age of NIL, with the age of the transfer portal, we see now that the dynamic is so different, and we see a lot of players, going, 4 and 5 stars. We've seen it, follow coaches in other places to programs you wouldn't expect normally. We've seen it done at Colorado. We've seen it done at other programs trying to rebuild because they want to be instant impact players. And the days of really, committing to places like Alabama or committing to bigger universities and, as far as, power programs, and sitting and wait your turn are far and few between, especially, like I said, in the age of NIL and transfer portal and all the other moving parts we talk about daily, with recruiting and so much.
So again, Leanne and I have committed to showing up each and every day, typically at noon Eastern time. So join us each and every day as we run through the portal cycle and get everyone caught up on the current events, which by far the biggest news of the day is Connor Weigman, former Texas A&M quarterback, starting quarterback. Marcel Reed kind of moved his way in later in the season. There was a game against LSU. They're down a couple touchdowns. Marcel Reed comes in and saves them and then took over the job from there. Connor Weigman, former 5-star, has found a home at Houston.
Yes, he has. I mean, I think that was he was one of the guys that you had mentioned early on, a quarterback that we knew was going to definitely find a home, proven high school, at right, Cypress Bridgeland. So he didn't go far too much from home, didn't go far too much from College Station, but I think this will be a great fit for Houston again. I spend a lot of time in Houston, have been to a couple of Houston games, and they definitely have needed an offense. I think one of the biggest things that Houston struggled with this season was not being able to get into the red zone. They were very highly effective in getting down to the red zone, but where they had trouble was being able to execute getting into the red zone as far as making touchdowns and where it matters, putting points on the board. So I think this is a great match made in heaven. Of course, we know that they've hired Coach Nagel, former LSU tight end, as their new offensive coordinator. So I suspect that this is a great, Nagel, had a lot of success at LSU, but obviously we've seen the tips and turns of LSU as far as, where that program stands. So I think that hiring, Nagel at Houston is going to bring a lot of success as far as the recruitment and the roster building. And we already see it here, being able to attract, Connor's talent to play at us, at Houston. Again, the city of Houston, surrounding areas. There's no question whether you go to the high profile schools that you hear us talk about all the time on the show, or just the surrounding area. So I think it's going to be interesting to see the direction that Nagel, being the new offensive coordinator for the Cougs, is going to go. But again, he's great to start because you can't start your offense with having a strong signal caller. So this might be the breakout place for Connor.
Leanne, we also have a couple commits to talk about. One to Ole Miss in edge rusher Deshaun Womack, and then you got Texas Tech getting interior offensive lineman Hunter Zambrano.
No, and again, these are Womack was a highly coveted edge coming out of obviously LSU. This one I think for Ole Miss is even sweeter. The fact that we are able to still get a Bayou Bengal to not necessarily flip, but to come over this way. Womack was on campus. Like many of the transfers we see, I think Lane Kiffin is notorious when he brings a guy on campus, especially during the portal season, that it's pretty much close to a done deal. He tends not to advertise, and I think that the feeling was mutual. I think that from what we hear, it's been a great visit, and I think a player like Womack, who's played against Ole Miss and who's seen what the defense can do and what Pete Golding and the development that's going on at Ole Miss is a big attraction and a selling point. So I don't think it was any question that Womack knew what he'll be getting if committing to Ole Miss, and it didn't take any time. Less than 24 hours, and now he's officially an Ole Miss Rebel this morning.
You'd made a comment to me before we came on about Bill Belichick, and folks, check out. We did a live stream this morning about Rich Rodriguez going to West Virginia and Bill Belichick, of course, at North Carolina, and that's just fascinating to a lot of people because of obviously you're talking about the most successful NFL head coach during the Super Bowl era, which covers the last 50 plus years. So Bill Belichick, and then he, of course, gets the North Carolina job, and what that could look like, what that could mean in this era of the transfer portal and NIL. 247's reporting this transfer running back Malachi Hosley from Penn is looking forward to his first meeting with Bill Belichick. So what are your initial thoughts about Belichick at North Carolina and what he could be trying to do to build a roster?
Well, anybody who can manipulate a system and find an edge, it's Bill Belichick. We've seen him do it throughout his NFL career. And like I said, it's really interesting to see how UNC, not being typically a football program based school, has been able to pull two top coaches, not just from the college level when they pulled Mac Brown initially, but now, at the NFL, and NFL legend Bill Belichick out of retirement. I think this is going to be, whatever the price tag on that final contract, I'm going to say, as far as a marketing perspective, as far as a recruiting perspective, I think when you say, hey, if you want to talk about a person who can develop any type of player at any level from any way, it's Bill Belichick. Just look at all those Super Bowl rings. I don't think you have his actions definitely speak for themselves. So I think this is a great hire. I'm really interested to see how Bill Belichick, we've talked about how you build and you manage a roster, but like I said, anybody who's had experience managing and building a successful roster would be Coach Belichick. So I'm interested to see how he's going to take obviously his experience and how he made success in the NFL, especially most notorious, most of all that we know him with the Patriots. Of course, those 2 seasons winning Super Bowls with the Giants. But I think it's gonna give UNC an edge, and I think it's gonna be really interesting. And for a lot of people who don't follow Belichick and think he's notorious for developing players, but like we see, he's got an eye for talent. And like I said, we're going to see, and what's great about the portal, you're going to see a coach, especially like Belichick, go for those players that he sees something that's different. And I talk about separation all the time, Mark, in recruiting. We have a ton of 4-star and 5-star guys, but some of these guys, they've hit the portal multiple times, or we've seen that even though they found success, highly coming out of high school, highly touted with all these accolades, they just haven't found a home where they can translate it. And, that is a perfect example. Bill Belichick going not only for a running back that probably most people don't know, but coming out of an Ivy League school. I know firsthand how Ivy League football works. Having gone to Brown, graduated from there, but my roots are in the Brown football program. Seeing the different type of how recruiting and college level program works there. It's very different than, getting spoiled in the SEC. So it's really interesting to see Belichick, build his roster from under the radar guys, but that's usually where he finds success. So kudos to UNC, because I don't think that could have come at a better time. Like I said, as far as if you want to attract top kids, top talent, I think they just did it with that announcement and officially hiring Bill Belichick.
Okay, we've got a number of other players that you have been tracking that have just hit the scene. New guys on the block to watch out for. You've mentioned Gavin Hill, the former 4-star defensive lineman. They turned him to a tight end at Florida. 4-star DeAndre Coleman from Coastal Carolina at wide receiver. Kevin Coleman, familiar with him. He was recruited by Florida State heavily, started there, went to Mississippi State. He's in the portal along with the guy that we talked about yesterday in Cal quarterback Fernando Mendoza, edge rusher William Wanari, who actually we just had his picture up here. Yeah, he's officially in the portal as well from Mizzou. And then wide receiver Caleb Odom. He's looking at Miami as well. And Casey Concepcion, of course, we talked about from NC State, the wide receiver, who's one of the first guys that hit the portal last week.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. And I said, I like to talk a lot about value players. We see a lot of kids, just going back to some of the guys that we're looking at new. Gavin Hill, like I said, what I like about this kid, he just hit the portal this morning. He's one of those guys, minimal action, decided to redshirt. And then, we talked about it, guys taking that route, redshirting, playing a few games, getting a little bit of experience, but ultimately hit the portal. I'm really excited to see where he will land up, because like I said, he's a Florida native. And during his high school career, he played both ways. He played, defensive lineman. He played on the offense as an end. He played, every position. And these are the players and he was quite gifted during his high school career, highly touted, in 7A, which of course, if follow high school football, I mean, being able to be with bigger teams in a 7A, it's just like being in the SEC or bigger conference. A lot of heavy competition, a lot of talent. So he's one that I really think um, he will get a lot of attention here in the next coming hours. Like I said, he just hit the portal. But what do you like about a player, similar to what we talked about when we talked about Casey Concepcion, is you can put them in multiple positions. And the fact that you can get a guy of his size, I was trying to look at my notes. I have them all over the place. But a kid like Gavin Hill is something and an interesting player. He may not have had a lot of experience, but he's played a couple games in the SEC. He's played for Florida, coming out of high school. Like I said, being a two-way player means that he knows the different dynamics of the side. And I think a lot of people don't understand how that can be really valuable, because when you take a guy, I mean, JJ Pegues, we saw it, a former tight end turned defensive lineman, how effective he could be in a place like Ole Miss. With Gavin Hill, he doesn't have that much weight in him, but the same thing, when you have a guy who's converted, who's primary, who can play both ways, they can read both ways, which means they have a really excellent internal radar. So I like Gavin Hill's stock to rise. He's really interesting to see, and I suspect that a lot of fellow SEC programs, I feel like Ole Miss is always looking for some strong tight ends. Alabama, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the other some of the less prominent schools come after him. A place like Louisville, some of the ACC schools, obviously, I would say Clemson, but we all know how Dabo Swinney feels about the portal. And so he's a really interesting one that, like I said, I saw hit this morning that I'm really, I think his stock will rise for the next few hours. Like I said, he's a versatile player. He knows how to play both ways. He's got a good frame. And a lot of other things, like I said, that aside from his skill set. So just kind of going back, he's one I'm excited. I'm just going through my notes. Let's see. DeAndre Coleman, another touted 4-star wide receiver out of Coastal Carolina. I'm trying to look at my notes on him. He's out of Alabama, so I suspect that Coach DeBoer will go heavy on him. He's really talented, really speedy, got great hands. Just from the initial, film that I watched. So I think he'll be another rising star that a lot of programs will be in contacted with him soon. So he'll be one to watch that hit the portal. And then let's see. Sorry, we got a lot. You see, it's always like 20 million things going on at one time. And you always have really great analysis on that. The one kid that I'm really interested to see, like we talk about, we mentioned two names. We mentioned, of course, State wide receiver Kevin Coleman, hitting the portal out of Mississippi State. I mean, when you look at him, that's a huge, huge hit for Mississippi State in an already struggling offense, trying to find its offensive identity in the first year of, Jeff Lebby. That was a big hit. He's going to be, he's going to be someone that everybody will go after. I mean, I guess he was the most productive player, that Mississippi State had. I was trying to see where I wrote all his info, but all his catches, everything. We have it right there pulled up. Of course, he's no stranger to the portal. Started out his career at Jackson State, then hit to Louisville, and then last season transferred from Louisville to Mississippi State. So this is another guy that brings experience. Obviously, he brings production, and this is a big loss for State. So it'll be really interesting to see where he goes. I'm hearing from some sources that, believe it or not, there's a big interest and a big mutual interest coming out of Missouri. So look for him to be visiting there soon, if not within this weekend. But I'm hearing that Missouri has a very, very strong want for his services. And again, in a Mizzou team that's looking to build from experienced caliber players to keep some momentum heading into next season, this would be a great fit for Coleman.
Very good. We welcome your comments and questions. Again, Leanne and I checking in every day on the transfer portal to get a feel for what's going on and the latest updates. As we saw just yesterday when we looked at the feed, and some of the stats that were being posted already had as many players in the portal through the first couple of days than we did for the entire portal cycle, the first few portals going back to like 2020 and 2021. I see that a pretty accomplished quarterback on the lower levels has hit the portal. This reminds me of Cam Ward a couple of years ago. Of course, he was at Incarnate Word, and not a whole lot of people had seen him at that point. And here we are. He's going to be at the Heisman Trophy presentation in New York on Friday. Abilene Christian quarterback Maverick McIver has entered the portal.
This is it's a talk about full circle for his pedigree. His father played ball here in Texas, so he's got a lot of good bloodlines. Hasn't really found his home until he found Abilene Christian. But it was really interesting because when we had a former coach who left, knew Maverick from his time in that Texas growing up. And it was so funny because I've actually met Maverick's mom. We were in a line, and she saw my Ole Miss hat, and we were talking, and it was a really, really small world. And this is before the time that he actually had committed to Abilene Christian. So it was kind of funny at first because, like I said, it was such a small world. And we were working with his initial recruitment when he was being recruited at Ole Miss. He had made some visits when he was looking for a home and everything. So it's really interesting. This is a really talented kid who hasn't got a lot of spotlight. He's very, very under the radar. But like I said, his father, former college football player as well here in Texas. His bloodlines are very strong work ethic, great leadership. I think wherever he goes, I think he's going to be very productive. But again, he's one of those quarterbacks I don't think has had the really opportunity to find a home that really can showcase his talents. Got a really great deep ball, has a good consistent arm. Again, so it'll be really interesting to see where he goes. But this kid is someone that I've seen personally early on before he was an Abilene Christian. So I think he's one of those really under the radar gems that I think given the right development, given the right home and the right coaching staff, I think he could be really productive and be a game changer for the right program. I could see him somewhere in an ACC school, or somewhere like in a place like Arizona, or just something very different, because he's just very unique. He's a very traditional quarterback, but I mean, he's got a very strong work ethic, and I think that there's a spark in him that hasn't really been unleashed. And like I said, I think for this kid, like for Maverick to really set the tone and really be able to explode like I think that he's capable of, then, like I said, he was at Texas Tech before he went to Abilene Christian. So he's got experience, I think, but him leaving outside Texas, I think would be a strong fit for him.
AJ Green is a talented guy who suited up for Arkansas throughout most of his career. I saw him mostly with the Hogs, and he's a guy that moved on to Oklahoma State this past season. Was supposed to be kind of the 1A to Ollie Gordon's, number one RB1 spot there,
Yeah.
but unfortunately he went down with an injury. So AJ Green is testing his wares in the portal there, and just a number of guys continue to be available here.
And yeah, kind of circling back because we were on the topic of Mizzou. We talked about William Nwaneri, and he's a talented edge. I mean, he was probably one of the best gets in this last recruiting cycle, probably in Mizzou program history. Ole Miss was heavily recruiting him. A lot of schools were recruiting him. So when he decided to come to, Mizzou, it was kind of like this shock factor, so it's going to be really interesting. Um, he will be similar to what I believe Jahea Motis will be, is a high value player. He does have 4 years of eligibility. He was a 5-star coming out of the high school circuit. Extremely physical, NFL ready caliber talent. I'm talking a beast. When you watch him in his high school film, I mean, he just oozes out of the tape athleticism. He's a great. I mean, there's just he checks off all the boxes. I know we say that all the time, but this kid right here, when you just watch him, there's very few kids, like I say, that really do live up and translate to that 5-star, 4-star potential in those rankings. But he's a kid that really jumps off the page. And again, this is a really big loss for Mizzou in so many ways, especially on the defensive front. Because, like I said, this is a kid that no one expected to go to Mizzou, but it just goes to show a testament of Mizzou pushing and building relationships. But again, he's testing the waters. But I expect that he will be another high value, obviously, for his skill set and his talent. But I believe that a lot of programs that we would expect to go after him, obviously based on his skill set and talent, will pass on him because he's going to be a high value player, and rightfully so. I mean, he's talented, he checks off all the boxes, but one of the most things we also have to remember, rarely do we get a guy in the portal who has 4 years of eligibility. So that's another factor to factor into when these guys are asking, or their agents are negotiating their new NIL contracts. I mean, rarely do you get a kid. So you're potentially investing in a guy who's very talented, who has a ton of upside, who is NFL ready, who's probably going to come onto your team despite him being, very young, have that ability to execute and be an impact player. So he's a big investment, and he's going to have a big ticket, I believe, with him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to a place, I'm just throwing some names out there, like Louisville, like Cincinnati, like Colorado. Colorado right now is attracting a lot of high value players. And like Dion says, they're very selective in who they pick, obviously, in their high school recruiting, but they also can afford to invest in big time players like we talked about, Jaham Otis, that lean towards Colorado, and that probably is going to be where he ends up, and some other guys, making visits. We mentioned it here, Caleb Odom. He's a very sought out after wide receiver, very much in the mix with Miami, Ole Miss, and Colorado. He's going to be on the move now. He's a kid who's we've said it, is going to take the process a little bit more slower. He's a very high value kid, but he also is taking into consideration, obviously, his career and other things outside of football. So he's actually set to, former Carrollton High School standout. Started 12 games at Alabama, had a very productive season there. Big body frame, 6'5", 227. The thing about Caleb Odom, coming out of high school, he was recruited as a tight end wide receiver. I think that kind of was different in his recruitment, because a lot of schools were, he wanted to play this position, but were recruiting an opposite and vice versa. So, and he initially committed to Nick Saban. So he will be at Colorado this weekend, and he'll be at Miami the following weekend, and he will close at Ole Miss as of now. There might be dates, but going back, we didn't mention it on the Ole Miss show yesterday, but I really like Caleb Odom to Ole Miss. Ole Miss was his first initial offer. They never really stopped recruiting. They've had a long-lasting relationship, and it's a good note that these are situations where, as much as you put money on the value, where they matter. And I think another key component is that one of the guys who recruited an Odom initially when he committed to Alabama was Coach Joe Cox, who's now obviously at Ole Miss. So I think that all the boxes as far as Ole Miss are very strong and heavily. And I'm hearing a lot of sources within the program saying they feel very confident that they can get Odom to Ole Miss and to Oxford. And again, he'll be making that visit, his last visit, the 2021. So right before Christmas, right before the portal ends. But again, Colorado is a school that I think we mentioned a lot here that is really picking up steam with play people like Odom, Nuarni, and obviously Otis. So it'll be really interesting to see, as we kind of settle into day 3, day 4. But as you can see, how long have we been on here already? And it's constantly moving, constantly. But again, a lot of high value players and a lot of not so high value players as far as rankings and recruitings. But again, Bill Belichick's perfect example. Where's he going? Where's his first meeting going to be? With an Ivy League Penn State running back. So it just goes to show, that there's going to be a lot of players that we know and a lot of players that we don't know that are going to be on the market. But again, it's going to be an interesting ride, but that's kind of where things are today. So we have people that found their homes, people that are, testing the waters, but a lot of high value players. I mean, we talked a little bit about it. I know that a lot of people are in search of quarterbacks right now. You mentioned it, you've talked a little bit about Cal quarterback. I mean, I was just looking at some of his stats and his tapes, extremely productive, and I've kind of sat here and thought about it because there's so many reasons why these kids leave, whether it's not playing time, but we've seen a lot of productive playmakers like Kevin Coleman at Mississippi State, like, Mendoza at Cal. And, these players have had their position. It's no question that they would probably be the go-to guy. So you wonder, what other factors in their recruitment, or why would you not want to stay in a place right now that you are the guy, you are the starter, you are their go-to guy. So it's really interesting to see a lot of high profile guys that haven't really had to sit down and been bench warmers. They've been an asset to their program, decide to leave.
Texas right now has one of the best tight ends in college football in Gunnar Helm, and they may have found his replacement for next season. All Big Ten tight end Max Clare. We touched upon him the other day as well. 51 catches, 4 touchdowns at Purdue, despite their issues on the offensive side and at quarterback and offensive line and just about everywhere, but still productive even at Purdue. And he is taking a visit to Texas. Again, the big news on the day is Connor Weigman, Texas A&M quarterback, moving on to Houston. And then Leanne has lined us up with a whole bunch of other guys to keep a lookout on who have just announced here in the last, let's say, 12 hours or so. All right, Leanne, anything else we wanted to hit on today?
No, I think we hit everybody. The names to look at, like I said, 2 names that you've mentioned and we've kind of talked about was Casey Concepcion. I think he's going to be a value player. I hear from under the wire that Ole Miss is also looking at him. I don't know if we've officially put out that offer, but don't be surprised if that comes home soon, Rebels. I believe a lot of SEC schools will be going after him. Mark talked about, just his ability to be able to play at multiple positions, be productive. And of course, you heard me talk about running back. We've talked a little bit about running backs today, but Fluff Bathwell, South Alabama, that's another guy to watch. He's going to be another high value player. And don't be surprised if Bill Belichick calls him out to UNC as well, because I feel like he's another under the radar that maybe we haven't heard a lot about, obviously, from him being at South Alabama. But we pulled up the numbers. Take a look at the tape. I mean, he's another guy that, need for speed. He checks off all the boxes. So those are some players that we're looking at. Of course, like we said, like Mark and I will be here every day at noon to bring you the updates, the commitments, where everybody's heading, because the moving parts in this are ever changing so quickly. But we're super excited to bring you. And like I said, make sure you subscribe to the main channels or to your favorite Voice of College Football team channel and leave us a comment if there's guys that you want to talk about, teams that we want to talk about. We would love to talk about your team and what they can do to build a roster and highlight what they're doing for recruiting.
You can see more with Leanne and also Ruby Dreher every Wednesday at 2 Eastern on the Ole Miss Live show. That's on the Ole Miss channel. Rebels Live, 2 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. Again, Leanne and I updating you on the transfer portal every day at noon Eastern. So we expect to be back here, same time, same location on Friday to update you. The transfer portal's on the move, so are we. Okay, Leanne, good to see you.
Sir.
And I'm sure we'll have so much more to deliver on Friday.
Yes, we will see you guys tomorrow.